In the heart of a rain-lashed London night, where the cobblestones gleam like obsidian and the fog swallows the desperate cries of the forgotten, a single choice can rewrite a destiny. This is a tale of shadows and silk, of a woman hunted by a ghost and a duke whose heart was a fortress of ice, until a blood-stained stranger crashed into his world. Before we descend into the secrets of Blackbriar Abbey, please subscribe and join our circle of story lovers. Leave a comment below letting me know which historical era pulls at your heartstrings the most. Chapter 1. The Midnight Intruder. The rain did not merely fall in London that October night, it punished. It turned the soot of the East End into a slick black bile that clung to the hem of Lady Vivian's once exquisite emerald silk gown. She ran, her breath coming in ragged, searing stabs that burned her lungs. Behind her, the rhythmic thud-clack of heavy boots on stone signaled that the cleaner was closing in. He was a shadow among shadows, a man whose only purpose was to erase the mistake she had made, stealing the red leather ledger from the cabinet minister's study. Her slippers were ruined, her hair a sodden mass of dark curls unspooling down her back. She reached the mouth of a narrow mews just as a massive black-lacquered carriage rumbled past. It was a vehicle of the high aristocracy, heavy, gilded, and indifferent. With the desperation of a drowning soul, Vivian lunged forward. She didn't wait for it to stop. As the carriage slowed to navigate a sharp turn, she wrenched the door open and threw herself into the velvet-lined darkness of the interior. She hit the floorboards hard, the scent of expensive tobacco and aged brandy filling her senses. Before she could even gasp for air, the cold, unforgiving edge of a stiletto pressed against the pulse point of her throat.
"Give me one reason," a voice rasped, a voice like velvet dragged over gravel, "why I should not spill your lifeblood across these cushions this very instant." Vivian froze. In the dim amber glow of the passing street lamps, she looked up into the eyes of a predator. Duke Alistair Thorne, the man the Tun whispered was the Iron Sentinel, stared down at her. He was devastatingly handsome, in a way that felt dangerous. Sharp cheekbones, a mouth set in a grim line, and eyes the colour of a winter sea. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling, "there is a man. He means to kill me." Alistair didn't flinch. His gaze raked over her, the tear in her bodice, the smear of blood on her cheek where a brick had grazed her, and the frantic way she clutched a small object beneath her cloak. Suddenly the carriage jerked to a halt. Voices rose outside, harsh, authoritative. "Hold. By order of the watch, we're looking for a thief in green silk." Vivian's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She looked at Alistair, her eyes pleading. The Duke's expression remained unreadable, a mask of aristocratic boredom that had been forged in 1,000 ballrooms and just as many battlefields. The carriage door was wrenched open. A guard stood there, lantern raised, light spilling into the opulent cabin. "Your Grace, apologies for the intrusion, but a woman was seen—" He stopped. Alistair did not move the knife, but he shifted his body with a fluid, predatory grace, shielding Vivian from the guard's direct line of sight. But he didn't hide her. Instead, he dropped the dagger into the shadows of the seat and lunged forward, grabbing Vivian by the waist and hauling her onto his lap. Before she could cry out, his mouth crashed onto hers.
It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a claim. It was searing, possessive, and tasted of salt and secrets. Vivian's mind went blank, her fingers instinctively clutching the lapels of his heavy wool overcoat. The heat of him was a shock against the freezing rain on her skin. Alistair broke the kiss just an inch, his thumb bruising the soft skin of her jaw as he turned his head toward the open door, his eyes flashing with a well-bred fury. "Forgive us," he growled, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that brooked no argument. "As you can see, my fiancée and I were in the midst of a rather private disagreement.
Is there a reason you are interrupting the Duke of Thorne's personal business?" The guard blanched, his lantern wavering. "Your Grace, fiancé, we didn't know. We were told a thief." "Does she look like a thief to your man?" Alistair snapped, gesturing to Vivian's ruined but clearly expensive silks. "She is the future Duchess of Thorne, and she is exhausted. Close the door before I have your badge for breakfast." The door slammed shut. The carriage lurched forward. Vivian remained frozen on his lap, her heart racing for an entirely different reason now. The silence between them was thick, charged with the electricity of that staged yet terrifyingly real embrace. She looked up at him, her lips still tingling. Alistair's eyes narrowed, the iron mask returning as he eased her off his lap and back onto the opposite bench. He picked up his dagger, wiped a non-existent speck of dust from the blade, and sheathed it. "Do not mistake a tactical maneuver for a rescue, Lady Vivian," he said, his voice cold enough to induce a shiver. "I know exactly who you are, and I know what is in your hand."
He leaned forward, the fire in his eyes reflecting the shadows of the night. "You are not safe, not from the men outside, and certainly not from me. But for now, you are mine to hide." Chapter 2. The Gilded Fortress. "This is to be your cage," Alistair remarked as the carriage ground to a halt. His voice was devoid of the heat that had defined their kiss in the mews. "You will find it more comfortable than a Newgate cell, I assure you, but do not mistake the silk for freedom." Vivian stepped onto the gravel, shivering as the salt air bit at her skin. The staff of Blackbriar was already lined up, their faces masks of professional indifference, though she could feel their curiosity burning. To them, she was the mystery woman who had ensnared the untouchable Iron Sentinel. "Remember your part," Alistair murmured, his hand coming to rest at the small of her back. The touch was firm, a reminder of his ownership in this charade. "You are Lady Vivian, my intended. We have fled the prying eyes of the Tun to find solace in our devotion. If you falter, if you so much as blink like a woman who is afraid of her betrothed, the man with the scar will find you, and I will not stop him twice." The juiciness, as the gossips of London might have called it, began that very evening. Under the guise of a whirlwind romance, Alistair insisted on a level of proximity that made Vivian's blood sing with a terrifying rhythm. Because the cleaner was known to be a master of infiltration, Alistair declared that no room in the Abbey was safe for her save for his own. The master suite was a cavernous expanse of mahogany and midnight blue velvet. A massive four-poster bed dominated the room, its hangings heavy enough to muffle a scream or a secret.
"I cannot sleep here," Vivian whispered, staring at the bed as a maid finished drawing a bath behind a folding silk screen in the corner. "Alistair, this is madness." "It is security," he replied, unbuttoning his heavy wool waistcoat with a clinical precision that drew her eyes to the breadth of his shoulders. "The locks on these doors are reinforced. There are guards at the end of the corridor. And I," he added, tossing the waistcoat onto a chair and turning to face her, "am the finest marksman in the kingdom. You are safer in this room than anywhere else on God's green earth." But Vivian did not feel safe. She felt exposed. As the maid departed, the only sound was the crackle of the hearth and the gentle splash of water from behind the screen. "Bathe," Alistair commanded, though not unkindly. "The gowns in the wardrobe were my mother's, untouched for years, but timeless. Choose one. We dine in an hour." Vivian retreated behind the screen, her heart hammering. The water was hot, scented with lavender and sandalwood, but she could not relax. Through the translucent silk of the screen, she could see the silhouette of the Duke. He had poured himself a glass of amber liquid and sat by the fire, his long legs stretched out, the firelight catching the sharp line of his profile. She scrubbed the London soot from her skin, her mind racing. Who was this man truly? He was the Iron Sentinel, a pillar of the establishment, yet he was harboring a thief. He provided her with exquisite gowns to replace her rags, dresses of heavy cream satin and deep wine-coloured velvet, and filled her days with rare books from his library. One evening, as she struggled with the intricate laces of a corset, she felt his presence behind her. His fingers, calloused and warm, brushed aside her hair. "Allow me," he said softly. Vivian held her breath as he worked the laces. His knuckles grazed the bare skin of her back, sending jolts of electricity through her spine. In the mirror, she saw his eyes, usually so cold, so distant, darkened with a hunger that he could not entirely mask. "Why are you doing this, Alistair?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. A scandal would be easier to manage than a fugitive. He paused, his hands tightening on the laces for a fraction of a second, drawing her body flush against his chest. She could feel the hard planes of his muscles, the steady, rhythmic beat of his heart. For a moment, the mask slipped. The Iron Sentinel looked lonely. "Perhaps," he murmured, his breath hot against her ear, "I am tired of being the only thing in this house that doesn't breathe." He turned her around, his gaze dropping to her lips. The tension was an ache, a physical weight between them. For a week they had lived as husband and wife in all but name, sharing meals, sharing a room, sharing the heavy silence of their mutual secrets. Vivian found herself watching him in the firelight, noticing the way he furrowed his brow when he read, the way he moved with the grace of a wolf. She was falling for her jailer, and the danger outside was nothing compared to the danger he posed to her heart. Chapter 3. The Breach. The ballroom was a sea of shimmering silk and flickering candlelight. Vivian felt like a fraud draped in Alistair's family diamonds. The necklace felt like a cold collar around her throat, a reminder of the price of her safety. She moved through the crowd on Alistair's arm, practicing the graceful tilt of a head and the practiced smile of a woman in love.
"Steady," Alistair whispered, his hand covering hers where it rested on his sleeve. His touch was a grounding force. "You are the most captivating woman in this room. Believe it, and they will believe it too." For a few hours she almost did. She allowed herself to be swept into a waltz, the world spinning in a blur of gold and white. In Alistair's arms, the danger felt miles away. His eyes, usually so guarded, held hers with an intensity that made her knees weak. It wasn't just the role they were playing, it was the way he held her, as if she were the only thing keeping him anchored to the earth. But then the music changed to a somber minor key, and she saw him. Across the crowded floor, standing near the shadows of a velvet curtain, was a man who did not belong. He wore the livery of a footman, but his posture was that of a soldier. And then he turned his head. A jagged silver scar ran from his temple to his jaw, the mark of the man who had chased her through the rain-slicked alleys of London. The world tilted. Vivian's breath hitched, and the colour drained from her face. "He's here," she choked out, her fingers digging into Alistair's arm. Alistair didn't need to ask who. He felt the tremor in her frame. He scanned the room, his eyes turning back into the cold flint of the Iron Sentinel. "Go to the Rose Garden, the east exit. I will deal with this." "No, Alistair, he'll kill you," she whispered, her mind spiraling into panic. She couldn't let him die for her. She couldn't let her sins destroy the only man who had ever truly seen her. Ignoring his command, Vivian turned and fled, not into the garden to hide, but toward the servants' wing. If she could lead the killer away, if she could draw him out of the house, perhaps Alistair would be safe. She ran through the darkened corridors, the heavy skirts of her ball gown snagging on the corners of antique furniture. She burst through the French doors into the moonlit rose garden, the scent of damp earth and dying blooms filling the air. The fog was rolling in from the sea, thick and white, swallowing the statues and the hedges. "Vivian!" The voice wasn't the killer's, it was Alistair's, echoing with a raw, unbridled fury she had never heard before. He caught her by the fountain, his evening coat discarded, his white shirt gleaming in the moonlight. He grabbed her shoulders, his grip tight enough to leave bruises. "What were you thinking?" he roared, his composure finally, utterly shattering. "I told you to stay behind me. I was trying to save you," she cried back, tears stinging her eyes. "He wants the ledger, Alistair. He wants me. I won't let you lose everything because of a mistake I made." "You think I care about the ledger?" Alistair stepped into her space, his chest heaving. He trapped her against the cold stone of the fountain, his face inches from hers. The iron was gone, replaced by a desperate, jagged heat. "You think I offered you my name just to silence a scandal? You think I brought you to my home, shared my bed, and protected you out of some sense of duty?" He shook his head,
a bitter, self-deprecating laugh escaping his throat. "I have spent my life guarding the secrets of this crown, Vivian. I have been a man of ice and shadows, but I cannot breathe when you are out of my sight. I cannot think of a future that does not involve waking up to the sound of your breath in the dark. I didn't save you for the ledger. I saved you because I am utterly, hopelessly undone by you."
The confession hung in the air, more dangerous than any assassin's blade. Vivian reached up, her hand trembling as she touched his cheek. "Alistair." Before she could speak, a shadow moved in the mist. The click of a pistol being cocked shattered the moment. The sanctuary had not just been breached, it was about to be burned to the ground. Chapter 4. The Sentinel's Shadow. Sleep was an impossibility. The air in the master suite felt heavy, thick with the scent of Alistair's sandalwood soap and the lingering smoke from the hearth. Vivian paced the length of the Persian rug, her mind churning. Alistair was the Iron Sentinel, a man of the crown, a man of secrets. She looked at the heavy mahogany desk in the corner, then at the portrait of a grim-faced ancestor that hung on the far wall. Something about the way Alistair had stood before that portrait earlier in the evening, the way he had adjusted the frame with a lingering touch, tugged at her memory. With trembling hands she approached the painting. She felt along the gilded edge until her fingers snagged on a hidden latch. The portrait swung outward on silent hinges, revealing a cold steel wall safe. She shouldn't have known the combination, but she remembered the way Alistair's fingers had moved rhythmically on the tabletop during dinner. 3 turns right, 1 left, 2 right, a habit of a man who lived in his own head. The heavy door clicked open. Inside, tucked beneath a stack of gold sovereigns and official-looking vellum, sat the object that had ruined her life, the red leather ledger, the very one she thought she had lost in the carriage, the very one the cleaner was supposedly hunting her for. "Searching for something, my love?" The voice was like a lash. Vivian spun around, the ledger clutched to her chest. Alistair stood in the doorway, his silhouette framed by the dim light of the corridor. He looked different now. The romantic hero of the moonlit garden was gone, replaced by a man who looked as though he had been carved from the very stone of the abbey. "You had it," she whispered, her voice cracking. "All this time. You didn't save me from the street. You intercepted me." Alistair stepped into the room, closing the door behind him with a finality that made her flinch. "I am the head of secret intelligence for the Crown, Vivian. The ministry didn't just want that ledger back. They wanted the woman who stole it silenced. I was the one who signed the order for its retrieval." The betrayal felt like a physical blow, a cold blade through her ribs. "So the kiss in the carriage, the fiancée story, the sanctuary, it was all an interrogation." "At first," he admitted, his voice low and devoid of emotion, "it was the most efficient way to secure the asset and the witness. You were a problem to be solved, a loose thread in a very large tapestry." "And the killer with the scar?" Alistair's expression darkened, a flicker of genuine pain crossing his features. "Markham. He is my second in command. He follows the orders I was supposed to give. He believes I have gone rogue, that I have been compromised by a pretty face and a desperate story. And in a way, he is right." He walked toward her, and though she wanted to shrink away, she stood her ground. He stopped just inches from her, his presence overwhelming. "I was supposed to take the ledger and dispose of you, Vivian. Those were my instructions. But the moment you tumbled into my carriage, bleeding, fierce, and utterly unbroken, I found I couldn't do it. Every day I kept you here, I was committing treason. Every time I touched you, I was burning my life to the ground."
"You lied to me," she sobbed, the ledger slipping from her fingers to hit the floor with a dull thud. "I protected you," he roared, suddenly closing the distance and grabbing her arms. "Markham isn't just hunting a thief anymore, he's hunting a traitor's mistress. He wants to kill you to save me from my own weakness. He thinks if you are dead, the Iron Sentinel will return, but he's wrong." He pulled her against him, his forehead resting against hers. "There is no more Iron Sentinel, Vivian. There is only a man who is terrified that he cannot save the only thing that makes his life worth living. The truth was a jagged, ugly thing, but as Vivian looked into his eyes, she saw the ruins of the man he used to be. He had traded his honor, his career, and his safety for her life. He wasn't just her protector, he was her fellow fugitive. Chapter 5. Risking the Crown. Alistair looked at the red ledger on the floor, the book that held enough secrets to topple ministries and ruin lives. "The ministry gave me an ultimatum through Markham," he said, his voice flat and hard. "Hand you over and return the ledger by dawn, or face execution for treason alongside you." Vivian looked at the man she had grown to love, a man who was prepared to die for a woman who had crashed into his life like a summer storm. "Give it to them," she whispered. "Give them the ledger. Save yourself." "I cannot save myself," Alistair said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips, "because you are the only part of me left worth saving." He picked up the ledger and walked to the hearth. Without a moment's hesitation, he tossed the book into the roaring flames. The leather pearled and blackened. The secrets of the British Empire turned to ash and embers before their very eyes.
"Now," he said, reaching for a pair of pistols on the mantel, "the secrets die with us. They have no reason to keep you alive if the evidence is gone. We must ensure they have no chance to try." The night exploded into violence. Alistair led Vivian through the secret passages of the Abbey, stone corridors that smelled of salt and ancient dust, while the sound of splintering wood echoed from the main hall. Markham's men had breached the fortress. They emerged into the stables just as the first light of a grey, unforgiving dawn broke over the North Sea. Markham stood there, his silver scar gleaming like a brand. He levelled his pistol at Alistair's chest. "You were the greatest of us, Thorne," Markham sneered, "and you threw it all away for a common thief." "She is no thief," Alistair replied, his voice steady as he stepped in front of Vivian. "She is my wife, and you are on my land." The skirmish was a blur of smoke and steel. Alistair moved with a lethal, terrifying efficiency, a man possessed by a singular purpose. He didn't fight like a soldier, he fought like a man protecting his soul. In the chaos, Vivian found a strength she didn't know she possessed, using a heavy carriage lamp to strike down a man who lunged at Alistair's back. Finally, it was over. Markham lay in the dirt, disarmed and defeated, as the remaining men, faced with the burning of the ledger and the Duke's unwavering defiance, realized their mission had no prize left to claim. Alistair stood over his former friend, the Iron Sentinel once more, but with a fire in his eyes that no duty could ever ignite. "Tell the ministry that Alistair Thorne is dead," the Duke commanded. "Tell them the ledger is ash. If they ever seek us out, I will spend the rest of my life ensuring the remaining secrets I carry in my head find their way to the light." Alistair and Vivian did not return to the ballrooms of London. The scandalous engagement became a quiet, fierce reality in a small cottage on the edge of the Scottish moors, far from the reach of cabinets and kings. They had lost their titles, their wealth, and their standing in a society that valued decorum over devotion. But as Vivian sat by the fire one evening, watching Alistair, no longer the Iron Sentinel, but simply the man who loved her, she realized they had gained the only thing that mattered. They had built a sanctuary, not of stone and secrets, but of fire and truth. The world had burned, but from the ashes they had emerged together, two souls who had risked everything to find a love that was finally, beautifully free.